Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome to another episode with Montana Outdoor Science School. Today we're doing another live stream for you, and the topic is everything relating to birds. I had some difficulty narrowing down what I wanted to talk about with this subject just because birds are such a diverse group of animals. It all comes down to just everything to do with their lives, from their habitat to their diet, their size, everything to migration, courtships between birds, socialization between each other. There's so many things between birds that is different. So today I'm going to try to focus on just a few aspects that are true for all birds or differ just a little bit between various birds, but I'm going to try to be just generalizations of birds on this topic here. Montana Outdoor Science School is a program. We try to reach out to kids and get them excited and interested in science. We do this through all kinds of means. We have summer camps that are science-based in the summer, of course, and then we have school programs where students can either come visit us or we go and visit them. We always try to bring something exciting to the table. In this case, I have brought all my little bird artifacts along with me, but sometimes our programs and our curriculum involve science activities, they involve science experiments, sometimes it's games. So we do all kinds of fun things to get kids involved in thinking about nature, thinking about what the science behind things are. Without further ado, I'm going to get started with birds and just start with some of the basics about birds. I'm actually going to hold my camera, so give me a moment. I've got all kinds of good stuff here today with my birds. My favorite bird artifact we have is our raven skull here. You all, of course, know that if you find a skull of an animal, that means it's a vertebrate, it means it's had a backbone, it has a spinal cord. Skull is an extension of that skeleton that they have. And just like all the other vertebrates we've talked about, birds senses, the sense of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, of course. With the birds, they have some fun things about their senses. With their sense of sight, that's probably the biggest thing that gets talked about with birds. You can see here, this is the hole to which its eye would have sat, the orbit for the eye, and it is huge compared to the whole structure. I mean, look at that. It takes up the majority of the skull there, which I think is incredibly interesting. I also have a little quail skeleton over here. There he is. I'm going to show you guys something fun about the quail's skeleton, specifically with the eye there. Let me take this off very delicately. I have to be really delicate with these bones because of how fragile they are, and that's not just due to them being skeletons. That's actually due to how light bones are in birds. But do y'all see on this skeleton here how the quail has a little bone in its eye? That is something that all birds seem to have. As far as I was able to research, bones in the eye for birds are there to help stabilize the eye. Because it is so big, as we see here, it means that the eyeball needs a little bit of help being supported. For this bone, it can vary between species. It can be really small, it can be quite big. It doesn't always become apparent where it is, and especially with our raven here, the bone is gone just because it does float in the eye. It's not something that's attached to the rest of the skeleton. And so you don't always find bird skulls with that little bone eye in them. Because there isn't a bone in the eye, it is very difficult for birds to actually move their eyes around. And we, of course, know this with raptors. If you've ever seen the Raptor Center in one of their exhibits or doing one of their demonstrations, they talk about how their birds aren't capable of turning their eyes and instead have to turn their neck. And you can see how easy it would be to turn your neck if your neck was that long compared to your body. Birds have a lot more vertebrae in their neck than we do. We only have, I want to say, 7 vertebrae in our neck. There's more, of course, along our back into our rib area and into our pelvic area, but in our neck specifically, there's only a few. In birds, they have a ton more, somewhere between a dozen and 2 dozen, if not more, give or take one or two here and there. The neck is what allows them to then be able to see things. So they turn their neck in order to be able to view new objects around them, versus their eyes just aren't quite as capable of as much movement. You can see on this little quail skeleton that there is glue attaching that eye bone. I'm trying to get my camera to focus. I apologize, it's not perfect today. There we go. Yeah, if y'all can see, there's a little dab of glue to keep that little eye bone in there. On the quail skeleton, you can see into the nostril region, and you can see that there are nice sinewy cavities where the nasal bones are at. I actually have a better example. That one's a little hard to focus on. The raven is unfortunately a little bit too deteriorated, but this area in here is where it would have had a ton of nasal cavities, a ton of little bones and membranes, like what we saw on the cat skulls and on the dog skulls. It's obviously not quite as big compared to the skull itself. There's some good example right there. You can see that kind of web-like membrane of bone in the nostrils there. Birds do have a sense of smell. I'm not sure entirely how good of a sense of smell they have, but like other vertebrates, it is tied to their sense of taste. And a fun fact about birds' sense of taste is they are not capable of picking up spicy sensation. So they can still eat spicy foods, but they don't get the heat of a spicy food the way we would. Which means that things like peppers are not any trouble for birds who might graze on those. Anything that's got the spicy element, it's a chemical called, I want to make sure I get the word right. I'm not sure if I can say the word right. Maybe someone can help me out and type it into the comment section. By the way, if you have any questions about anything I'm going over today, feel free to type it into the comment section. We'd be happy to answer any questions. If I miss a question, we do have someone on hand too who can help to answer that question as well. But I'm trying to remember how to say this word. Maybe I'll give it a go. Capation? No. There's a spicy element in spicy foods, and the word is escaping me right now. So I'll let someone else help me out there, or if you guys want to, you can Google it for yourselves to find out. Something I want to note too about this bird skull specifically, you'll notice that it doesn't have the typical black beak of a raven that we often see, and that's because the beaks of birds are covered in keratin. If you remember from our talk with Charlotte the tarantula, keratin is what our hair and nails are made out of. It's also what beaks are made out of. It's different than what Charlotte's exoskeleton is made out of, which is chitin. Chitin is the thing that insects have that makes up their exoskeleton, but on a bird they have keratin that covers their beak. I do have one example, and this is actually my personal bird that has keratin on its beak. I'll show y'all. So I've got this little tiny bird here. It's so little, and you can see it's got a yellow beak, and that's keratin. As birds decay and decompose, this keratin does start to go away. It's not something that's permanent on bird, and it also loses its color, much like how we saw with the turtle shells last time. That keratin on the outside will begin to disappear, and the color will disappear along with it. But again, take a look at this bird. It has huge orbits where its eyes would go in comparison to how big its skull is all around. It's hard to talk about birds in general because of how diverse they are. I mentioned this earlier, and that comes simply from, it's everything. It's how they are designed, it's the size of them, it's where they inhabit, it's what their diet can be. There's so many things that make birds such a hugely diverse group. But some of the things that further make them what they are is the fact that they have feathers. Birds all have feathers, of course, and the feathers all have different types of uses. I've got here a sandhill crane flight feather. You can tell it's a flight feather because of how stiff it is. It's very, very hard. It needs to be rigid so that that bird can take off. It's also got this one side that has slightly shorter set of barbs on it, versus on this side, they're much longer. And this is to help give that bird a sense of lift as it's taking off. Something about the physics of feathers allows for it to be, I guess, gliding through the air and to be able to gain that lift. It's something unique about feathers. We've done something based off feathers, and that is we've designed our airplanes based on how feathers are themselves designed in nature. Something that is taken from nature and is designed based off something in nature is called biomimicry. So our sense of biomimicry is that we've designed planes' wings to be much the same or similar shape as birds' flight feathers to help us get that lift off of the ground. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about flying itself to be able to talk about the physics of how that works, but I'll continue with feathers. This is a very different type of feather. This is not a flight feather. This is a turkey feather, and it is more for what's the word? It's more for the looks of the bird. So there's a lot of birds where males end up having a ton of beautiful feathers. They have incredible patterns, and this is all just to be able to impress the females. It's a sort of courtship that happens between birds. Not all birds do this, but some of them do. The turkeys do, and you can see just how cool this feather is the whole way up. It's got lots of stripes. The tip has different types of colors in it. Other feathers along the turkey might have more of an iridescence to them. So depending on what kind of bird species you're looking at, the males versus females may look very, very different. Males may have bigger, brighter colors to impress the females. It's not their only means to impress them. Some birds will build really great nests. Some birds will create a really good environment, so an area that is their territory that their females can then get plenty to eat insects-wise. They may impress them with their songs. There's so many ways that birds go into courtship, but the feather is one of those ways, so I always think that that's pretty neat. So that's the turkey feather. We've got the sandhill crane feather back here. Let's see. Oh, I also have lots and lots of little tiny bird feet. These are specimens that we were given to show the diversification of birds' feet. You can see, of course, they're all different sizes, and they have all different manners of claws. You've got ones here that are more straight, but you've got ones that are far, far more hooked. If you remember with raptors have very, very hooked talons in order to catch and kill their prey. Something that's unique about all bird feet, though, is that they have scales on their feet. Then, unlike the rest of their body, which is covered in feathers, their feet are covered in tiny little scales. And there's a theory that this is due to their relation to reptiles. It's theorized that birds are direct descendants of dinosaurs, and part of what gives that theory so much weight is evidence such as this. There is, of course, other evidence, including fossil evidence, including genetic evidence, but they find that the scales on birds' feet like this kind of, it connects them, it links them back to reptiles. Reptiles, of course, have scales as well. On this one, this blue grouse, I wanted to point out, it does have feathers all the way down to its toes. Some birds do that. Some birds do grow feathers in between the scales of their feet. For grouse specifically, the feathers are there to help protect them from the cold of winter, but also to give them kind of a bigger platform on which to walk around on. Birds who are walking around in winter kind of get snowshoe effects with their feet if they're covered in feathers, and that's exactly what is happening with this blue grouse with the feathers on it. Ooh, I want to go back to the quail skeleton because there's something about the quail skeleton I wanted to mention. So, on this quail skeleton, we have, of course, the head and the neck and the body and the legs, and here's its feet here. But on its sternum, do y'all see this attachment point right here where it's connected to this little steel pin? This is a part of the sternum of the bird, and this specifically is called its keel. Now, not all birds have keels, and there's two distinct groups of birds that either have a keel or don't have a keel. Those that do have keels tend to have flight feathers and the ability to fly because they have flight muscles attached to this keel. It's kind of like on our predators, the sagittal crest on the back of their heads is an anchor point for bigger muscles to attach, and thus they have more strength in that. Same thing with birds and their keel. Their flight muscles, their muscles used to get them off the ground, are attached here. So you can often see that if there is a keel, it's typically going to be a bird that is able to fly. However, there are exceptions to this. Penguins, for example, have a keel, but we all know, of course, penguins cannot fly. But what do penguins do? They swim a ton, and they need to be really powerful swimmers. So their their flight muscles are now used as swimming muscles. So you still see keels on penguins. Any bird skeleton that you would find that does not have a keel is definitely a bird that can't fly, though. So this is true of big birds, especially ostriches, emus, cassowary? I think that's how you say it, cassowary. Birds that are simply so large that they can't take off, but are also large enough to not need to take off anymore. They've adapted in such a way to now be able to find their food simply by foraging on the ground. They don't really have to worry about taking off, and that's just one of those adaptations of birds. So not only are feathers really a key thing about birds, but also birds lay eggs. They share this with, of course, amphibians and reptiles, and unfortunately, I don't have any examples of eggs that are from a bird. However, I do have a funny story and an awesome specimen. I have a specimen of a hummingbird, something that was donated to Moss from Montana State University. The hummingbird itself is really neat, but you'll notice this little box in here with it. And funny story on my end, I thought I'd share with you guys. In this box, there's a little white ball, and for years that I've worked at Moss, I thought that it was the egg of the hummingbird. It seemed the right size until recently I took it out, realized that the little ball inside was smaller, and then suddenly realized it was a mothball. This is a mothball box, so I don't have an egg for a hummingbird, but you can only imagine the size of a hummingbird's egg. Size between birds is incredibly diverse again. The hummingbird being one of the smallest ones, and then we get all the way up to ostrich, which are huge. And it could be said the same thing for their eggs as well. Ostrich eggs, oh my goodness, ostrich eggs are probably bigger than a softball for sure. I have an example from high school at my parents' house, and it's just an immense thing. Versus something like a chicken egg, much smaller bird, of course, we get eggs only about yay big. Which brings me to my next thing. I'm curious, do y'all think the chicken came first or the egg came first? I would like to hear from those who are watching in the comment section. Go ahead and put your idea down. I will share with you guys my idea later. It's always such a fun question to bring up to kids, which came first, the chicken or the egg. We talked about diet being very diverse amongst birds too. So, of course, with the hummingbirds are nectar drinkers, so they have to have flowers available for them to be able to collect energy from. Not true, of course, with most birds. Most birds are herbivores or some kind of combination of eating vegetation and insects or small animals, and that makes omnivores. And then, of course, we have raptors, which are exclusively carnivores. They only eat meat as well, but just so diverse. The bird group is just such a diverse species. Let's see. There's really only one more thing I wanted to touch base on, and that is birds and breathing. So birds have a pretty crazy way of breathing. When we breathe, we have two sets of lungs. We breathe in. We take a deep breath, there's air in our lungs, and then we breathe out. We also breathe out carbon dioxide as we breathe out. With birds, they're still breathing in, they're still breathing out, but they're never completely emptying the lungs that they have. And in fact, birds don't just have lungs, they have air sacs throughout their entire body, throughout their entire body cavity here. So with that, birds, they'll breathe in. Some of the air sacs will hold on to that oxygen that they've breathed in, while some air sacs fill with the carbon dioxide. Bird's able to breathe that out, but it still retains oxygen in some of those air sacs. And then that oxygen is able to flow through other air sacs, and it becomes almost this cycle, this circular motion of the bird breathing in and out, but is always able to maintain oxygen in its body. This is part of what gives them as much energy as they have and the ability to fly. We, of course, have seen how fast birds move their wings. They might not have been able to develop to be that way if they weren't able to extract as much oxygen as they possibly could. So that was something really unique about birds I wanted to share too. Oh, I suppose I could touch base on one more thing. How light birds are. Birds have to be light, of course, because they have to be able to fly. For those birds that don't fly anymore, they still possess really light skeletons. And in fact, we've all heard about how birds have hollow bones. It's not literally hollow bones, but I'll bring back the nostril example here, the nasal cavity. If you remember how that bone inside the nasal cavity is kind of webbed, it's a similar thing going on inside their long bones and inside of their small bones. They have kind of a maze of very porous bone throughout their body, and this gives them that light weight so that they are able to take off and fly. The Raptor Center has a turkey vulture named Pilgrim. Pilgrim's such a great gal for doing demonstrations with, but I'm always surprised because they tell us how much she weighs, and she weighs so little. I want to say she only weighs like 7 or 8 pounds.Maybe if someone on the Raptor Center ever watches this video, they can let us know in the comments what the weight of Pilgrim is, but I'm always so impressed at how light of a bird she is. Did anyone talk about which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't see any comments. That's okay. I feel, in my opinion, that the egg must have come first. This is a debate that can continue on forever and ever between people. There's pros and cons to both sides, of course, but it's always interesting to hear and see the arguments behind what people think came first, whether it be the chicken or the egg. I feel there had to have been a chicken that came from an egg, so therefore the egg must have been laid first. But that's always just a fun debate to have with folks. If you enjoy watching our videos, be sure to follow us on Facebook so you can find out. Oh, great! Someone found out how much Pilgrim weighs. Thank you, Jess. Pilgrim weighs 4 pounds. See, it's so little, and she's such a big bird. It's always incredible how little she weighs, I should say. Moving onward though, if you do like our videos, please follow us on Facebook. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel with Montana Outdoor Science School. We're always putting out videos, and pretty soon we're actually going to start teaming up with GVLT to start doing some hiking trail, some kind of interactive videos about being out on trail, things you can find out on trail. So be in tune, or stay in tune for those videos coming out soon. We'll give you guys more information too as we get closer to that. But thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you next time, Friday, 11 a.m. for our dissection of grasshoppers. That's what we'll be doing on Friday. Thanks, everybody.